The X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X-Zone Radio Show or endorsed in any manner by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, the X-Zone Broadcast Network, its affiliated networks, stations, employees, or advertisers.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you live and around the world from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, IPBN Radio Network, and TalkStream Live Radio. If you'd like to send us an email, xzone at xzoneradiotv.com, on all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV, and our main website, for the radio part, at least, is www.xzoneradio.com. My guest this hour is J. Alan DANELEK, and Jeff's an old friend of the X-Zone. He is an author. Some of his books, talk about UFOs, ghost reincarnation, just to name a few of the titles that he has dealt with over the many years. His website is www.ourcuriousworld.com. And Jeff, welcome back to the X-Zone. How are you doing, my friend?
Hey, Rob, I'm doing just fine. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing pretty good. So what's new with J. Alan DANELEK these days?
Well, let's see. Recently became a grandfather.
Hey, congratulations.
So that was nice.
Congratulations.
I'm reworking my ghost book. I'm looking for a publisher. I'm going to see if I can get one out there. And I had a ghost book for a number of years with Lou Allen, and then it kind of went away. And I'm redoing it. I'm putting in pictures of people that people have sent me of authentic ghosts.
Ooh.
And so it's going to be bigger, better, expanded version of what I had before. And I'm just looking for someone who's interested in picking it up.
Jeff, why do you think ghosts are still such a hot topic after all these years?
I don't know. I think that people obviously are interested in their own mortality, and because they really have questions about that kind of thing. They want to know what's on the other side. A lot of people have actually seen ghosts, so it's not like it's something that's rare. And I just think that it's just a fun story. I think it's also more acceptable now to believe in ghosts than it was, say, 10 years ago. People have sort of gotten used to the ideas of paranormal things like this, so it's not so taboo as it used to be.
What about all these different TV shows that are supposed to be reality? Some deal with ghosts, some deal with UFOs, some deal with Bigfoot. In your opinion, are they an asset or a hindrance when it comes to the reality of what they're supposed to be real about?
Well, they're kind of a two-edged sword, really. On the one hand, they do bring some of these subjects out there, so people are aware of them and they can sort of learn what's going on in that field. So in that respect, they're positive. And some of the shows actually can be very interesting and useful. However, I think overall, they tend to diminish the credibility of the paranormal field, especially some of these ghost shows. I think shows like Ancient Aliens tend to do more damage than good sometimes. And I think that's unfortunate because there is a real phenomenon to study there that people are either making a joke out of or ignoring because of some of these shows.
Well, Giorgio's hair certainly doesn't help.
Yeah, and he got his own show out of it. So I'm thinking I'm going to try the same thing. We'll see what happens.
It certainly is a mismatch of stuff that's going on. And then you've got the new people who are finding the interest in the paranormal. They go to the internet, and how do they find out what is real, what isn't real? Because here they are, they're trying to get their feet into something that they are interested in. And my goodness, you Google ghost, you Google UFOs, you Google, Bigfoot, and where does somebody go when they want to learn? I mean, besides reading your books.
Yeah, besides, that's what I was going to say there. Just read my book. I think that you really need what's called discernment. Discernment is the ability to kind of look at something and decide whether this strikes you as being authentic or someone's sense of humor or some amateur's attempt at finding out things. And as you look through some of these sites, I think you do get a sense for people that seem to be knowing what they're talking about and others who don't. You've just got to be very careful not to believe everything that you see. And realize there's a lot of people out there who just want attention. And that's the only reason they're out putting stuff on the internet. And but once you work in this for a while, you get to sort of look for certain signs of authenticity and honesty and credibility. And you know it when you see it, and by the same token, you know it when you're dealing with a rank amateur or a hoaxer, too.
Jeff, you and I have to take a break. Please stand by. X-Zone Nation. J. Allen Danelek is our special guest this hour. www.ourcuriousworld.com. And we'll be back talking about ghosts, hauntings, UFOs, things that go bump in the night, and much more. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell. Whatever you do, don't go away. That when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Gibbs A. Williams, Ph.D., is a practicing psychoanalyst, supervisor, researcher, and author in New York City. Much of his life has been dedicated to understanding nature and the uses of meaningful coincidences or synchronicities. His radical and original non-Jungian, non-mystical, non-magical theory of synchronicities illuminates much of the fog surrounding this challenging and perplexing topic. His ideas and manners are fresh, presented in a style that is both entertaining and highly informative. He is also an expert on crisis intervention, specially focused on violence reduction for the police and citizens, mastering anxiety, frustration, and stress without the use of medication, and effectively preventing and treating heroin addiction. Dr. Williams can be contacted at his email address at gwwilliamsny11@aol.com or visit his website at www.drgibbswilliams.com. Welcome back, everyone. Jeff Allen Danelek is our special guest. www.ourcuriousworld.com. Jeff, what is your favorite topic when dealing with the paranormal?
Well, the one I've always been the most fascinated by is reincarnation. I just think the idea of coming back into the flesh in different contexts over and over again, to me is just a really interesting subject that I find that really resonate with a lot of people when you talk to them about it one-on-one.
So, as an author and as a researcher, where do you feel most of the credibility in the field is? Is it with UFOs? Is it with ghosts? Is it with Bigfoot? Is it with the strange, the weird, the bizarre? Or does it stretch right across the spectrum?
I believe that the most solid evidence that I've seen is within the reincarnation.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the research that's been done in there, it tends not to attract a lot of hoaxers and kind of strange people like some of the other fields do. I've always found the stuff that I've discovered while doing research on that to be among the most credible. I think that the credibility of Bigfoot, however, is improving, especially since Les Stroud got involved with it and gave it a little bit more validity, because it was really getting beat up by the other show, Searching for Bigfoot, whatever that show was. And they really needed a shot of credibility, and I think Les Stroud brought that. So I think that I'm seeing a lot more interesting stuff coming out of that field now than before.
I understand that you had the opportunity of meeting Jason Hawes and Grant Wilson of Ghost Hunters fame. So what can you tell us about them as researchers, as ghost hunters, and as people?
Well, I've never got a chance to actually go on a ghost hunt with them. I met them at a couple of conferences and got to talk to them and get to know them a little bit. They read my book on ghosts, and they thought it was a good book. They endorsed it, so I was very pleased with that. But in terms of their methodology, I think it's quite sound. I think they're careful about the evidence. They seem to do a lot of their homework. They have a lot of equipment. I think that they're very credible for the most part. I think that the show was hurt when Grant Wilson left. They seem to need that dynamic between them and Jason, and I think that once he decided he didn't want to do it anymore, and I don't blame him, I mean, he was probably just burned out on it, I think that the show diminished quite a bit in terms of what they were finding,
right,
and just the entertainment value of it. In terms of them personally, I thought they were very down-to-earth guys. They seemed very friendly, very natural. They didn't seem like they were impressed with their own stardom. So I came away from meeting with them with the impression that they were very down-to-earth, good guys. And I think if anybody ever does find evidence of the paranormal, I think it'll be someone like that'll do it.
What changes have you seen over the years when it comes to the way that people are investigating the paranormal?
Well, I feel in terms of the ghost hunting shows, they're much more entertaining value. They want to scare you. They turn the lights out. They try to, every little sound they have to analyze. I think it's getting much more ridiculous.
Hokey.
Instead of looking, just hokey. Yeah. Instead of finding something and really examining it closely from a scientific standpoint, it seems like they're going more for the shock value or just the sort of entertainment value. And I think that's really unfortunate, because when it first started out, when Ghost Hunters first came out, for example, and there was really nothing else like it on TV, I thought it was really fascinating. And then as other people tried to copy it, I think it started to lose a lot of its credibility and all the other shows with it.
Yeah, it seems that the paranormal has spawned a nice little cottage industry for certain people.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you saw that especially with UFOs and Roswell and all that stuff. Once Roswell came out, I mean, it's like the whole serious study of UFOs kind of went out the window, and they were replaced by all these sort of conspiracy theories that are much less interesting to me and much more difficult to prove. But it seems like the people who were legitimate UFO investigators were drowned out by the people that were, pushing the whole Roswell thing.
What's your take on Roswell?
Honestly, the research I've done on it, and having been in the military myself, I'm pretty well convinced that it was a mobile balloon that went down and the story got developed and evolved and added to over the years until eventually it grew beyond its original storyline. If you look at the original story, all it was bits and pieces of shredded aluminum and sticks spread across the ground. And the military obviously mishandled it because it was a top secret program. Mogul was a balloon that was attempting to determine whether the Soviets were testing atomic weapons. And so it was classified top secret. So they came in and they find bits and pieces of some of the equipment they were using, and they start threatening people, don't say anything, we know where you live. And naturally people blow that out of proportion. And it just became just crazy, I think.
My biggest problem with Roswell is Jesse Marcel himself. Because here you've got the base intelligence officer. He goes to a crash scene, he collects evidence, and instead of going back to the base to maintain the chain of evidence and custody of the evidence, what does he do? He goes to his house, wakes up his wife and kid, and lets them play with the evidence. Now,
well, there's a lot made about Jesse Marcel being the intelligence officer, but think about it for a second. In 1947, the intelligence officer at a little base in Roswell, New Mexico, was not really a high-profile position. Well, I mean, this was not exactly the middle of the Cold War right there.
No, but Roswell, New Mexico was the place where the the bombings on Nagasaki and Hiroshima left from. So it had a certain significance.
Well, that was the squadron that was based out of there. However, that was, by 1947, that was irrelevant. I mean, the fact that the atomic weapons were launched from a bomber from that squadron were no longer really relevant to the world situation. We'd moved on to other things. Yeah. And people make a big deal about that. Say, hey, that was where the atomic weapons were launched from, and say, yeah, that may be true. But so what? It had nothing to really do with what was going on in July of 1947.
Mm-hmm. That is true. That is so true. So why do people still look at Roswell, New Mexico as the mecca of ufology?
Well, like you said, it has a cottage industry feel to it. It's taken on a life of its own. There are people who have made their entire careers off of Roswell, merchandise and books and speaking engagements. And to come out now and say, there probably really wasn't anything to it, isn't going to happen. You've got too many people who are dependent upon that for their livelihood. And I just don't think it's ever going to go away. And I think people just enjoy believing those kinds of conspiracies. They're a lot more fun than just to say it was a weather balloon, that crash. I mean, that's kind of a party killer there.
When it comes to the conspiracy, I don't think the governments of the world are conspiring against the citizens of the world. I don't think the conspiracy is being perpetrated by the Vatican. I don't think the conspiracy is being perpetrated by anyone else but the UFO community. Because as long as they maintain a conspiracy or the idea that there is a conspiracy in play, they don't have to produce any evidence to support any of their claims.
Yeah, they do have a tendency to put the burden of proof upon the debunker.
Exactly.
Which is exactly the opposite of what it should be. You're right. I believe that the government is competent enough, any government is competent enough to keep that kind of a thing hidden, especially with that many people involved in it over that many years. And when we had the Manhattan Project, where we were developing the atomic bomb, that was a huge government program that was, a super top secret.
Right.
And it still only took the Germans about 12 months to find out about it. They didn't know exactly what it was we were doing, but they knew about the Manhattan Project while it was still going on.
Yeah, and if the president of the United States can't have a presidential affair with an intern in the most secure building of the world without everybody finding out, months after it happened, how in the name of God are you going to hide a crash UFO with dead or living aliens?
Exactly. That's the point I make in my book, UFOs, The Great Debate. I go into great length talking about the problems with the conspiracy theories. And, the book didn't get a wide reading. People really didn't respond to it because it wasn't saying what they wanted it to say. But I explained the case, how difficult it is, and the whole reverse engineering question, all these different things. But if you don't say what you're supposed to say, no one's really going to listen to you.
Yeah, and that's really sad. It's really sad. Plus, within the UFO community itself, there's a lot of dissension. There are a lot of groups that don't want to share the information that they get. Why we've been told that even MUFON doesn't release a lot of the information that it has because they want to have proprietary rights to it.
Right. Like I said, when it first came out back in the 50s and 60s, the early UFO investigations, I think there was a lot more validity to them because it wasn't a big cottage industry then, and the people who were involved in it were really very serious about trying to find out what was going on. And now it's become really a business for people, and I think that at this point it's almost impossible to know what to believe anymore.
What do you think? We've got to take our news break here, but what I'm going to ask you to ponder over this break, Jeff, is do you think that Kenneth Arnold actually saw extraterrestrials from another planet? Or do you think he saw some type of secret government project? That's the question that Jeff will help me find out or answer on the other side of this break. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. And you can listen to us Monday through Friday from 11 p.m. until 2 a.m. on the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net, IPBN Radio Network, as well as on TalkStreamLive.com. I'll be back on the other side with Jeff DANELEK. Whatever you do, don't go away.
You're listening to the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Radio's authority on the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology. Celebrating 25 years of broadcasting. Broadcasting around the world and to the great beyond.
It was a terrifying experience.
I thought we was going to go to jail for murder.
That day, we were a little behind, so we worked until it was starting to get dark.
We loaded up the equipment and hadn't driven very far when we caught glimmers of this glow coming through the trees. I urged Mike to hurry up and get up there.
Travis had the door open before we even stopped. As he got closer, I heard the sound.
One of the guys said, "You feel that?"
I really panicked then.
I told him, "Get the hell out of here."
It didn't come directly to me. It came to the deputy sheriff. 3 of us volunteered right away to tell him what had happened.
Sheriff Gillespie definitely didn't believe it.
He says that we better be certain because we get in a lot of trouble.
When we went to search the next day, they split us up, and the whole time the deputies asked me, if you just tell us where the body is, we can all go home and get this over with.
We're talking about 100 people combing through the wooded area. Nothing turns up.
All week long, I've been hearing they're going to set it up to make you guys look guilty.
We're a rough-looking bunch then. Some of us have been in trouble with the law before.
Y'all ain't never going to come out of that jailhouse.
We couldn't get out.
I tried to sneak out the back door the day of the polygraph test. I was scared to death.
On top of that, you have media.
I literally would be on 2 telephones at the same time.
We've even got some coops in here now that's coming in and out to see the freak show, as they call it.
Everyone descends.
I just wasn't going to stand there and listen to it anymore.
Granny says, "This is Travis. I'm back. I need help." When I did hear that he had been returned, it was almost as unbelievable as the original thing.
I just looked at my mom and says, "I told you we didn't kill him."
Travis Walton reappeared after several days with a bizarre story about a ride in an unidentified flying object.
People were desperate to explain it away. Why are you sticking up for Travis for all this time? You know this really didn't happen.
What happened to Travis after we took off in that truck? I can't tell you.
I hated Travis for a long time after this. My whole world just tore up.
But I believe every word Travis said about it. He's never lied to me about nothing.
It's a net negative. We lost our jobs in the immediate aftermath.
And now you're not able to talk about it with anyone because you know that they're going to laugh at you, they're going to look at you like you're crazy.
But if you don't come out and tell your story, somebody else is going to tell it for you. There's a degree of responsibility. Certainly I have to accept the bad. If I can direct what's happened in a way that I can make something good happen in the world, I'm looking for it.
Order your copy of Travis, The True Story of Travis Walton, today at www.traviswaltonthemovie.com.
Welcome back, everyone. Jeff Allen DANELEK is our special guest, www.ourcuriousworld.com. Jeff, you wrote a book about reincarnation, and going into the research of the book, were you a believer or a skeptic in reincarnation?
Well, it's interesting. I had been in a evangelical Christian church for 20 years, very active in the fundamentalist churches, and I didn't believe in reincarnation at all. And then I started to kind of fall away from it. I started looking at other spiritual ideas, and I sort of became interested in reincarnation. I wasn't really looking to write a book at that point. I was just kind of exploring a different option. And one thing led to another, and eventually I came to become a believer in it after looking over the evidence, and that's when I started writing my book about it. So it was kind of a process. I would say I was a believer at the time I wrote the book, but I wasn't, before that.
What were some of the revelations that you discovered doing the research for your book?
Well, the biggest one that I came away with personally was what I call echo memories. So that is things that happened in your past that are sort of a reflection from a previous lifetime. It explained a lot of things that, a lot of interests I had when I was a teenager. I was really fascinated with World War II. I was fascinated with military history, with the history of Germany. Even though I'd never, been there, I had no, I didn't come out of a military family or anything. I was just growing up in a farm in Minnesota. But I had these real fascinations for all these things. And under hypnosis, it turns out that I had been a German soldier in the Second World War. And when I found that out, it explained a lot of these sort of unusual interests I had growing up and why it seemed like it was such a big part of my life. So I think that's the biggest thing I got out of all that was how it impacted my own life and how I understood myself better once I became to realize what reincarnation does.
Question I asked before we went to the break at the bottom of the hour was, do you believe that Kenneth Arnold actually saw UFOs from another planet, or do you think that he was witness to a new military craft?
Well, if his observations are accurate, and he sounds like he was a very careful man, the speed that these craft were doing was anywhere from 1,200 to 1,700 miles an hour, which was well beyond anything that the United States government had flown at that. Matter of fact, we hadn't even flown the Bell X-1 at supersonic speeds yet. Chuck Yeager wouldn't do that for another few months. So the idea that we had a craft that was capable of twice the speed of sound in 1947 is pretty difficult to imagine. Additionally, if we did have an aircraft like that, he saw multiples. I think he saw 7 or 8 of them in a row. If we had that kind of an experimental plane, we would have probably had one of them, and it would have been flown in far more restricted areas. So the idea that this was some kind of secret government technology, I think, is really unsupported by the facts. It doesn't appear to have been a reflection in the windows or anything like that. So the only conclusion is it probably was something extraterrestrial.
But
whether they're mancraft or something, we don't know.
But how do we know what Kenneth Arnold actually saw was real? How do we know that this wasn't a publicity stunt? There were no radar trackings. There were no other independent witnesses to corroborate any of his statements. Why was his word taken as verbatim? Why does everybody believe him?
Well, I guess, that's kind of a personal decision, whether you're going to believe him or not. The question is, what did he really have to gain from it? At the time that this happened, there was the UFO phenomenon had not come out yet. The term, he actually was the one who coined the term flying saucer. So it wasn't like he was trying to ride the crest of a new fad. He was quite straightforward about it. And years later, he didn't really take a lot of make a lot of money off of it or anything. I'm not really sure, in other words, what the motive would be for making this all up. But the publicity he got was minor and over pretty quickly.
But once again, there was nothing to add to his credit. There's nothing to corroborate his statements. Absolutely nothing. And yet everyone, just like Roswell, bows down to these stories that in all reality may be nothing else but fiction.
Well, it's always a possibility. I'm not surprised that there's no radar tracking or anything, because really radar was still in its infancy back then. We didn't cover most of the country with radar.
But what about witnesses?
He was flying by himself. Yeah. So unfortunately, there wasn't anybody to back it up. At least Roger Patterson had Gimlin with him when he saw Bigfoot. Wow. So he at least had a second person.
Yeah, wasn't oh my gosh, Kenneth Arnold, wasn't he a photographer? Wasn't he a journalist? Didn't he always carry a camera with him, as some reports stated?
Well, he did carry a camera with him afterwards because he thought he might have a repeat experience with him. So he made it a point of carrying him around afterwards. Right. Cameras, of course, back then were not very easy to use. It wasn't like today where you can point and shoot. So even if he had a camera, I don't know what he would have caught. The things were such a far away, I think 40 to 50 miles distance he estimated. I was impressed, though, with the way his mind worked when he saw these things, because he went through this whole process of trying to figure out what it was. He would even, rock the wings to see if it was a reflection. He rolled down the window. He was trying to use landmarks to calculate where they were and the speed they were moving. He was using his instruments. I mean, he was very analytical about it. He wasn't just somebody who just saw something and freaked out. He actually took the time to try to solve it.
But
step
why
by step.
Did he, at the time of the sighting, radio in to anyone what he was seeing?
Not that I'm aware of. I haven't found anything
to that
effect.
Exactly. So doesn't that seem strange? If you are on a search mission and you see these 7 strange objects, that you don't pick up the radio and try to get try to establish with any other pilots in the area, or even to make the reporting to air traffic control or the military that this is going on?
Well, I think that part of the reason might have been the primitive nature of air traffic control at that point. This is over a very remote area of Washington State. I'm not sure what kind of range he would have had. He wasn't on a search and rescue mission. He was on a business trip. So, and what you would used to do back in those days is you really didn't have an air traffic control center that you could call into. You would have certain centers that you could reach at certain points, and you would just report that you had passed certain markers. But in terms of actually keeping a track of where you were as you were moving across the country, that technology just simply wasn't in place then. It wasn't until really the late 50s that we were able to start tracking people pretty consistently through the air, and you had a lot of these centers to call into. So I'm not surprised he didn't do that. He did report it as soon as he landed, though. He did make a report to the military, and he contacted authorities. I just don't know if he had the ability to actually call anybody with the aircraft he had in at the time and where he was.
I find it very suspicious. I really do. they're.
I suppose he
Excuse
could
me.
have seen something, some kind of an optical illusion or a mirage or something, and that's entirely possible. I don't really get the impression there was any collusion on his part. He could have been sincerely wrong about what he saw or mistaken.
Right.
But and to me, that would be a more likely reaction than that he just made this whole thing up out of cloth. There's no history of him ever doing this.
No,
I
I think that a certain amount of the responsibility has to go to the media, who ran with it without checking.
Right. I mean, it was a curiosity story, more of a novelty, and there wasn't really, like I said, UFOs weren't in the public conscience at that point. They really didn't become known until his story broke.
Well, what about the radio show by H.G. Wells, War of the Worlds? That proved that science fiction certainly had a strength, and I would imagine that the media at the time realized the potential of this story and just ran with it.
Yeah, I think there was a part of that. I suspect, however, that the media was probably more surprised by how big a story it became than anyone else was. The guy says, "Hey, I saw a bunch of lights, don't know what they were," and they print it, and the next day it's all over the papers. I think sometimes these stories kind of take on a life of their own, and it's even beyond the media's ability to control it.
Is it possible then that the reason the Roswell crash, or the alleged Roswell crash, got so much attention was because of the amount of attention that Kenneth Arnold got?
Well, in fact, there is a connection, because when they the Army first commented on the Roswell crash, they called it a flying disc. And that term, they believe, was lifted from the papers when they were talking about Arnold sightings, because he referred to them as disc-shaped. So it seems like the Army PR people just kind of lifted this idea out of from Arnold's story and used it when they described what they found as a disc. And then they later, of course, recanted it, which made it look even more suspicious to conspiracy theorists. And so I think Arnold did have some bearing on the Roswell story. However, a lot of people don't realize this, that at the time, the Roswell story was not that big a deal. Once the Air Force said it was a balloon, and they showed a picture of the guy with bits and pieces of a balloon, the story went away, and it was gone really until the 70s when Stanton Friedman resurrected it. And that's where it really began to take off again. But up to that point, no one really paid much attention to it.
And let's face it, what would Stanton Friedman be without Roswell?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm sure he believes it very strongly, but I just think that, like you said, a lot of people will believe pretty much anything and run with it.
I have a question for you from one of our listeners. This is going back to past life and past life regression. The question is, what from a past life would cause someone to become an addict in this lifetime? Could past life regression help end addiction?
Well, I suppose if you were an addict in a past life, it's entirely possible you could bring that affinity towards it. Let's say you're an alcoholic or something in a past life, and you come in this life, you might be prone to repeating that same behavior, for example. A lot of times, interests and affinities that you had in the past life will carry over into this present life. So if you were, let's say, mechanically inclined in your last lifetime, there's a good chance that you would be in this one also. The same may be true of addictions. You may have had all kinds of things that you were addicted to at some point, and you just carried over that. The need to have external stimulants in your body, whether it's alcohol or drugs or whatever, seems to be more of a psychological need. And those things may actually carry through from one incarnation to another. So, I mean, I don't have an easy answer, but that's what I would suspect is happening with an addict.
www.ourcuriousworld.com. That's ourcuriousworld.com is Jeff's website. And Jeff, keeping in the topic of UFOs, you wrote a book on the Great Airship of 1897. Was that a UFO?
Honestly, I really don't believe it was. I actually believe, and I go into some detail about this in my book, that it was an early airship that was created in secret by a group of people out of California. And I think that's what people were seeing. Now, the technology to create such a thing was available in 1897, and I make this all very clear in the book. But I really think that if there was anything to it, and I think a lot of the stories that came from it were probably fabricated, but I think there's a basis of fact behind all of the nonsense. Mm-hmm. And it was just that some people had developed a fairly substantial airship and were testing it, first over California and then over the Midwest, until something happened to it. It was destroyed somehow, and that was the end of the stories. Because the stories end very abruptly in April of 1897. They start in December of 1896 over California. They migrate east, and then they come to a complete end almost in the middle of April. And there's really nothing about it after that, which I find to be really interesting. You'd think that if it was just some kind of a fable, it would just keep going all the way to the East Coast. But it never did. It just kind of died out right there in the Midwest.
And then you wrote another book, Phantoms of the Skies, The Lost History of Aviation from Antiquity to the Wright Brothers. Tell us about that book, Jeff.
Well, that's kind of a little divergence for me. This is one of the few books I wrote that wasn't paranormal in nature. Mm-hmm. I was just really interested in the early history of aviation before the Wright brothers, all the people that had attempted to fly, both in airships and in actual airplanes. Some of these events going back, decades before the Wright brothers. And actually, when I wrote the Airship of 1897, it was some of my research on that got me interested in writing that book. And it was really a fascinating journey into early aviation and all of the mistakes people made. I have a whole bunch of blueprints in the back of different patents that people were trying to apply. And some of them are really pretty funny. This is absolutely almost cartoon-like in their look at how things flew. But it was just kind of an interesting book to write, and I really enjoyed writing it.
And then you and I talked about another book that you wrote. I'm just trying to remember. Oh, Dragon Soldiers.
Oh, well, that was part of my trilogy. Yeah. I did a fiction trilogy in which I have a husband and wife team of scientists, they're cryptozoologists, who go around the world looking for different creatures. And I have 3 books. The first one is Serpente Gigante, where they find this genetically altered anaconda in Brazil. And then in the second book, Nightman, they find a rogue Sasquatch, which is a little kind of a serial killer Sasquatch. And then in the third book, Dragon Soldiers, they're in Tibet, where they find these flying reptiles, basically, which are the basis for later dragon stories. And of course, in each book, these things almost try to kill them, but they get through them. But that was a great deal of fun to write these. It was just something I didn't have to do a lot of research. I could just let my imagination run wild and just put together what I hope was an entertaining story.
Speaking about entertaining stories, you and I have to take a commercial break here. Exonation Jeff Allen Danelek is our special guest. www.ourcuriousworld.com. All of Jeff's book are available on his website, and that is, once again, ourcuriousworld.com. Still to come tonight on the other side of the news at the top of the hour, Preston Dennett will be joining us to talk about UFOs and much more. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and we're coming to you live and around the world from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the X Zone Broadcast Network, IPBN Radio Network, and TalkStream Live. Don't go away. We'll be back. that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere. 24/7, 365. Named one of the world's greatest psychics, Elizabeth Joyce is now giving readings worldwide via Skype. Elizabeth Joyce is recognized for her clairvoyant ability to help find missing persons, her analysis of dreams, past life regression work, mediumship, and her accurate predictions. Elizabeth has been a frequent guest on the X Zone Radio Show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, now for several years. For an appointment with Elizabeth Joyce, call 201-934-8986 or Skype at elizabeth.joyce. And for more information, you can always visit Elizabeth Joyce online at www.new-visions.com. The new nonfiction book, Razor of Madness, is similar to cult movies like Clockwork Orange, Dragon's Tattoo, or The Other Side of Hell. Wayne Morin Jr. and Thomas Lee Howell will expose widespread and systematic deficiencies in this thought-provoking tell-all novel. Mind control rages among scholars in law schools. Human rights are ignored while thought reform and mental manipulation are accepted practices used as behavior modification. Dr. Louis Jolyon West comes to mind. Media and public scrutiny shows that United States mental hospitals are in fact destructive murder industries. Razor of Madness expose novel details this epidemic through an in-depth professional and personal investigation. For decades, there has been a revolving door policy that still releases killers and pedophiles back into society. The maestro of mind control continues to haunt America to this very day. Razor of Madness is available in paperback or as a downloadable ebook at Amazon.com. Gibbs A. Williams, Ph.D., is a practicing psychoanalyst, supervisor, researcher, and author in New York City. Much of his life has been dedicated to understanding nature and the uses of meaningful coincidences or synchronicities. His radical and original non-Jungian, non-mystical, non-magical theory of synchronicities illuminates much of the fog surrounding this challenging and perplexing topic. His ideas and manners are fresh, presented in a style that is both entertaining and highly informative. He is also an expert on crisis intervention, specially focused on violence reduction for the police and citizens, mastering anxiety, frustration, and stress without the use of medication, and effectively preventing and treating heroin addiction. Dr. Williams can be contacted at his email address at gwwilliamsny11@aol.com or visit his website at www.drgibbswilliams.com. Exonation, Jeff Allen DANELEK is our special guest. His website is ourcuriousworld.com. First of all, Jeff, thanks so much for coming back on the show. It's always a great pleasure talking to you, my friend. But I have to ask you a question. You meet and greet a great number of people when you're out talking about your books and doing the research for your books. Why do you think people love to have a negative look on things? For example, the government conspiracies, the cover-ups, the Illuminati, the New World Order.
I think that helps.
Yeah. Go right ahead.
It all goes back. Yeah, it goes all the way back, I think, to Watergate and the Vietnam War, when people first began to no longer trust their government. And it just seems now that it's a given that the government is corrupt, and it's full of secrets, and people don't really challenge anymore. I think it's just the age we live in, the gestalt, if you will.
I have to ask you, as somebody who lives in the United States of America, what's your take on what's happening in the political arena between the Democrats and the Republicans?
I think that no matter who wins, I think America loses. I just have never seen a campaign like this ever, with two very unqualified candidates. And I hate to say it, that I just don't even know if I can honestly vote this year. I just can't see myself supporting either one of them.
And I hate to say it, but it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better.
It does appear that way, doesn't it? But you never can tell. Maybe something good will come from all this disaster. We'll see.
As always, my friend, time goes by so fast whenever you're with us. Why don't you let our listeners know where they can get your books, as well as how they can find out more about you?
Well, the books are on Amazon.com, but you can also get them through my website at ourcuriousworld.com. I have a bio section in there if you want to read a little bit about me. And I also have an email link if you want to send me an email and ask a question or comment on something I've said. I'd sure appreciate hearing from you. So thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
All right, Jeff, you take care of yourself, and I look forward to the next time you join us back here in the X Zone. Until then, my friend, take care and be safe.
You too, sir. Goodbye.
Bye-bye, Jeff. X Zone Nation, Jeff Allen Danelek has been our guest of this hour. www.ourcuriousworld.com. That's www.ourcuriousworld.com. I'll be back on the other side of this break with the news as we continue here in the X Zone. My guest next hour, Preston Dennett, talking about UFOs. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. Send me your emails, xzone at xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, X Zone Radio TV. And you can listen to us 7/24, 365. In fact, after we finish tonight's live show at 2 o'clock in the morning, you can listen to us from 2 o'clock until 6 a.m. on TalkStream Live. I'll be back on the other side with Preston Dennett. Don't go away.